it was the night of April 18th, 2016 that we did this topic.
Oh.
There was
It's like, where are we going?
So 3 years ago, we had this topic. Can a game be too balanced? Pretty much almost exactly 3 years ago. It's April 18th. It's only within 2 weeks or so. The reason I thought about this topic to come back and revisit is strictly because it was just Matt and I at the time. And we have 4 people to talk about stuff now. So let's talk about, can a game be too balanced? Matt, the one game, I don't know if you remember that conversation.
Orleans.
It was Orleans. I actually downloaded the podcast to give us a view. It was great. And I listened to that section again. 1, our podcast quality has went up.
Yay.
Good.
2,
Good job, Tim.
it seems like we said a lot less, but at that time I was going through every episode, taking every single instance out. So sorry about that. And 1, I'm glad I have the volume under control because we were clipping a lot. It was like, if you wanted to hear how that sounded.
Yeah.
Anyway, so can a game be too balanced? And we're going to kind of let one of these two kind of chime in first here. Because I think, Matt, you said you had some other examples that you wanted to bring up, right?
Today?
Did you?
No.
Yeah. Matt, tell us some examples.
Whoa, I thought I said that. I thought you said you had some examples.
No, I did not say that.
Oh, well, anyway. Can a game be too balanced, Eric?
I do believe so. Like, there is some
I'm not saying
games-
perfectly balanced, but too balanced.
Right. There's some games where, you go through and you play with 4 or 5 people and you're all within 1 or 2 points. I think that makes a game too balanced. It feels like, when you play a game that's too balanced, it doesn't really matter what you do. I can take this action, it's going to give me, 2 points. I'm going to take this action, it's going to give me 3 points, but next time I can only get 2 points or 1 point. And it kind of balances itself out. So I believe that I like to see a little bit of a spread. Maybe not. Some games, there are issues where one person is going to get, just decimated. And I don't believe that's a good thing either. So there are some balancing issues like, having something that benefits someone that is in last place, that can kind of propel them forward a little bit to make it more of a closer game, but not really a really, really balanced game.
Catch-up mechanisms.
Right.
Which is an entirely different topic.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I agree with what you're saying with one caveat, and it's games that are longer. If the game is 15 to 20 minutes and people are getting scores that are really close to each other, that's one thing, because not everybody's taken that many turns. But in a game that's an hour and a half, which is probably the normal
average
game of like a mid-game length, and you've had like 10 to 12, 15, 18 turns or whatever, and everybody's within 5 points in a 150-point game, that's ridiculous, because it almost that's the problem we have with, not a problem, because Orleans is amazing. We said that in the podcast, but the thing we said is that every time we've played that game, the entire group, minus maybe one person, had been within the 120 to 130 range, and like even future plays, it's the same way. So it's like, there are a lot of things that you can do in that game to score points for everybody to be that close in the very end. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, your mileage may vary from group to group, but that seems to be in a lot of games that we play that are, like we were talking, pointsality, because it's like, it doesn't matter where you're getting your points from if you're always getting about 3 or 4 points a turn.
Right.
So, I don't know. What do you think, George? You want to chime in on this one?
Sure. I'm going round and round with myself on this one, and I'm hoping I'll figure it out by the end of this podcast, because I want to agree with you. I want to say, yes, games can be too balanced, for the reasons that you're mentioning. And then I look at games that are supremely balanced, and I guess the way that I could judge that is by how often they end in a tie. And and if you look at chess, the number of times that it ends in a tie, if both players are equal skill,
I would say it's very low.
No.
On a tie?
Can you even tie in chess? How do you tie in chess?
You have a stalemate.
Stalemate. Yeah. But I would
forgot about that.
So then the question becomes, is it the game or is it the players? What needs to be balanced? the mechanisms of the game, or is it the player's skill level that needs to be balanced?
Well, here's one thing that I mentioned in the first podcast that we did, or the second episode, is that if you're getting static amount of points, there should be ways designed in your game that allow you to get a random amount of points with the gambling aspect, right? So if you're going to get 4 points for doing an action that's considered safe, I just do it, I get that 4 points. There should be another action where you roll a die and maybe you get between 2 and 6 points. And so if you see somebody constantly getting a very average points every turn, then you can go out of your way to try to gamble a little bit to get ahead of them. And I feel like it's balanced because you have that risk versus reward tied in with straight points. And I think
you're adding luck element into it. That doesn't
but you can choose to do that.
Yes.
The balance becomes you could not get those points, or you could get more points than what you went for.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can get in the middle. But the idea is there's an option to do that instead of always taking the safe route. And the reason I bring this up is a lot of point salad games are the quote unquote Euro games, and they don't like luck. So everything is basically straight points, straight points, straight points. But if you're always getting like some of the maximum points, and it doesn't matter what you're doing unless you add in a lot of player interaction where you can stop somebody.
Interaction and different combos that you can do. This action is not going to give you any points, and this action is not going to give you points, but you set something up where you're going to get 15 points in one action is where I like to see it, rather than it doesn't matter if I go here, I'm going to get 2 points. If I go there, I'm going to get 3 points. And every turn, if you're making 2 to 3 points or something, I think that's a problem. Whereas I don't see a problem with, you can set up different combos that, maybe propel you in points a little bit more.
But if you're playing with 2 players that are equally skilled, they can do those same combos. Unless there was something that stopped them, like you took the card they need or whatever.
Right, or you took these resources or whatever else.
But I mean, that stuff happens in Orleans, like taking the spaces or whatever, but in the end, everybody's like 120 points. So that's why I think gambling mechanisms are actually kind of neat, because it allows you to do stuff without setting up combos or doing crazy things, and allows you to possibly get ahead if you can calculate the fact that you're very close in score. Now, I mean, you can gamble that you lose.
Which I'm not going to agree on the gambling mechanisms. I don't.
You don't like them, but
right.
But you take yourself away from what you don't like to do, because your play style does not lend it to where you like those type of actions.
Right.
I'm not saying if you like them or not. I'm saying if a game is always, if everything you do.
I mean, there is going to be some luck in a lot of games, but to incorporate just random dice roll luck or whatever,
card draw,
or card draw luck, I don't think is the detriment or the benefit in balancing any type of game. Is just to add more. I mean, that does give you variance, but is that the best way to add variance in a game is just to add more luck?
I can see a very serious Euro gamer objecting to that,
right,
and saying, okay, I played this game for an hour and a half, and really it could have just come down to a random dice roll. So why did we bother?
Right.
Or actually, that's what I would say.
True. But at the same time, if it's something that has zero luck, it comes down to
that's all skill, which is like chess.
Well, hold on. If you played the game for an hour and a half, and it came down to literally one move won you the game,
right?
Do you like that?
Luck? Well, yeah, I think that's fine. Such as
garbage.
Chess. No, I mean there is, and that's
Matt,
going to be more
on
the abstract level.
I mean, if you look at it objectively like that, I mean, obviously there's more variables involved than one move.
I'm not saying the game wasn't fun up until that point, but if it really came down to one action made all the difference. Because otherwise, on average, if you take your scores and you both end up within the 120 range after 10 rounds, and you're like, terrible math. But if you came down to where like both of us were scoring on average of 5.3 points a turn, right? And then on one turn, the average was it offset your average to 5.4 points. If you mathematically go back and like if you took really good solid two players and who are equally skilled to play a game, like a Euro style game, and then they played it 100 times or whatever, and then they got really good and they were really good against each other. So you take away the player skills, what I'm saying. And then you come down to what is the average score they are scoring on average.
Well, I think you should always account in the player skill. The skill set kind of determines or gives you that edge.
That's where I thought this whole thing was kind of about.
Right.
Because I think that's kind of where we got our experience from, was playing with a certain person who wasn't very familiar with board games and not saying, I don't know, we just kind of reflected on the play session and felt like anyone could have just sat there and
did anything.
and did anything and
like,
still
here's your
scored the
4
same with
actions.
us.
Oh, okay.
Because everybody, some people are like, oh, I felt like I did terrible. Oh, you came out with 5 points
won.
different.
And there has been games I've played, I'm like, man, I'm not doing real good. And it's like, well, I didn't score that far off from everybody, so
I did horrible.
Yeah.
But it didn't matter because I'm still right there with everybody else. Because it didn't really matter what you did, because everything is going to give you about X amount of points. Whereas, it takes maybe more of a skill set to get the most out of. I guess it's really getting the most out of every action kind of thing.
If you're looking at the game itself and saying, is the game balanced? Is the game too balanced? Then it becomes, how is the design of the game? Does it allow you that creative space to do something clever,
Right?
And put yourself above the other players? But if you don't have those options and all you can do is get the same amount of points as everybody, then I think I'm leaning to agreeing that the game is too balanced at that point. But not in a good way. It's more restrictive and constraining in what you can do.
Yeah, I agree.
That's fair. I mean, I get what I was trying to. I was coming off to, like, the game is balanced, but you're saying like the player skill is what separates them.
Right. Well, and I believe that's how it should be.
But if you take, I guess that's better than having a bunch of randomness. To where anybody can win, which is the problem with most board game tournaments.
And depending on what you're trying to do on a family game and stuff like that, playing with your kids, that randomness and that luck factor, that's a good thing. It's like, okay, my 8-year-old can beat me on this game. In that retrospect, it is good because they have a chance. It's not just requiring on our skill sets or our skill level on a game, but depending on what kind of game you're going after, I guess it doesn't matter on the game, because if you're looking at like point salad games where you're always scoring points for actions that you take, if everything is like 3 to 5 points, then the game is kind of like, does it matter? Then it comes down to how well you can strategically screw everyone else over in whatever little player interaction it has. Most of the time it's, I got there first, sorry about your luck, but I need it too. Right.
So that becomes more of the player skill than actually what you're doing in the game. But if you take it to other games, the balance, like Hiroshima Hex, so to speak, it's totally about player skill, because it's about seeing a strategy, whereas the other games are really just.
I mean, there is luck factor in that game as well, because you're pulling different tiles out of a bag. But yes, it is going to be also determined on your skill level.
That's fair.
Whereas chess, there's no luck in chess, and it's going to be all skill level. I, as a normal person,
how much of an advantage is it to go first in chess?
Oh, I don't know. I'm probably guessing very low or none.
It's an advantage. The white player does have an advantage.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm taking you played chess a bunch.
When I was younger.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Well, I'm still struggling with this. So, okay. If you look at some classic games that people have said are
awesome.
Awesome, right. Yeah. I was going to say that they're balanced, that they end up in ties a lot. Like Power Grid, for example, is one that can end up in a tie if the players are skilled.
I do not feel like Power Grid is balanced.
Okay.
Just because of
you're saying that the players are skilled.
Equally skilled.
Like
I think that's kind of what I was saying, though. It's I think if it's too balanced, me being awful at it should be able to be right there with Eric when we're playing.
Well, what? You should do just as well if you're awful at it?
Yes.
Right, that's what he's saying.
Game-
if it's
the
really
game will
balanced, it doesn't matter your skill level.
Pick my lack of skill level up for me.
Which in Power Grid, it does have some catch-up mechanisms.
What I was thinking we were talking about. I was thinking the opposite. I was thinking if the game is balanced, then it's fair for everybody. And if you do badly, you're going to do badly.
I guess, right. The wording is a little different. When we're talking about too balanced, right, I'm not talking about like all the factions in the game are equally balanced or everybody has a fair chance.
Which
what
is
we're
good.
saying is you can almost be like, man, I don't care about this game. And you play the game, you do stupid stuff, but in the end,
you're still
with the way
2
the game
points ahead,
operates,
within
everybody's
everybody
within
else.
5 points.
Oh, okay.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
Now I see what we're talking about. Okay.
I didn't explain this well to George before the show. Sorry.
Okay.
So maybe the title of this is misleading. Maybe it's
We'll take 5. You think about it.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well, let me change it just a bit.
sure.
And now I'm maybe this is not what we're talking about at all. But what if we're talking about a co-op game? And so it's the group of players versus the game.
Mm-hmm.
So if the game is too balanced, that would mean you would win about 50% of the time.
Sure.
And
that's fair.
it's fair, but it's not fun.
yeah.
Oh, you don't
I
think
think
so?
you should win 20% of the time.
I think harder co-ops is sort
the
of
better.
required. Yeah.
Yeah.
I could
So
agree on
so
that.
you could say it's too balanced if you win too often in a
co-op.
Or-
Unless
or-
you're really skillful, and then
yes,
and then you can skew those
Yeah.
those things.
If
where-
the game has if a game has that built into it, but a lot of co-ops don't. Like Samurai Spirit has
most of the time it's gonna be
legit-
more luck based, right?
right. It's straight up luck on math.
Right.
Mathematically, you're losing.
Yeah, you're going against the boat.
Right,
You're going against the casino.
But if you're playing like the D&D adventure games and stuff like that, it comes down to how well you can roll sometimes.
Right.
Because you might just dice the crap out of the game and be like, whoa, we
That was easy.
killed everything because we almost never missed.
Hmm.
So not that that's
Yeah.
player skill, that's luck.
Right.
But if in a game that has things that you can do that tremendously work towards your favor in the outcome, I think that's great. I think I would like to have a co-op game where you can do a lot of strategic things and win more often than you would lose, not based on some mathematical equation the game's built on.
Mm-hmm.
Tangent time. I mean, anyway, so
Well, okay, but other than Orleans, what would be an example of a game that you feel, in the definition that you're using, this game is just too balanced? Are we talking about like all the Felds? But I get crushed at those, so it's probably not that.
Right.
Give me 5. I'll get back with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think mostly it's like point salad games because I think it's a lot of games to me where there's not a lot of player interaction. It's weird because those games almost you can just be like, oh, I'm terrible at this game. You play it. No offense, George, apparently who's gotten crushed. But a lot of people who kind of halfway play the game, they still do really well. And I'm like, that shouldn't be it. I mean, if the game is balanced in that way, then you're not allowing for a lot of player skill and strategies to come out. It's just like handing out points at the same rate to everyone, no matter what you do.
Right. And so I want to agree with that concept. I want to say, yes, that's too balanced. I don't think that would be good, but I'm trying to think of when that actually happens. So I'm not sure I've encountered that.
Some of this might just be the feeling you get as you're playing the game. Not like the entire games as example.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm not going to say like Orleans, for instance, is one of the bigger ones. And that might be group specific. That everyone
we just happen to be our playthroughs.
But I mean, it is consistently the same points, like the same range. Everybody's within 15 points in a 120 to 130 point game. That's kind of close. Because I mean, for the most part, it's like legit, like one or two different things you did.
Yeah. There's a game coming out, so obviously I haven't played it yet, but it was hyped a lot, and it's called Tidal Blades.
Oh,
Right.
Tidal Blades, yeah.
Yeah. And so I watched a playthrough of that, and it just looks to me like there's so much mitigation in the the game in terms of what you can do and get on your dice that I worry that this is going to be an issue with that game.
Mm.
And I didn't back it because it just looked like it doesn't matter what you do. You
do what you want.
You do what you want. You just redo it. Just redo it.
I slightly felt that way about Dice Settlers. Like
Okay.
there's it's a lot of dice, but you're mitigating it left and right.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that.
It's very. I mean, Eric did have a couple of bad rolls.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
So, but that's like so
But most of the time it's going to work out for you where you do have a lot of mitigation. Sometimes you're going to still roll in a way where you're not able to benefit from those mitigations that it gives you.
We'll probably talk about that game in more length next time, but anyway, I don't know. I guess we probably ran this one to its course. Maybe we didn't have enough time to prepare for this. I don't know.
Well, one thing that I could say is I think it makes a difference, even if your scores are very close to each other. If you have gone down a very different path than other players and still come up with the same score, I'm not sure that would count as being too balanced. Maybe it would. I have to think about this more. But
I guess that depends because that could be a different strategy. But if if both
it
players
doesn't matter
were completely
which strategy you do. Yeah.
Yeah, if it happens consistently, yeah, that's true. It would be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That is interesting. It's interesting because at some point we want to. It's weird to think about it because you're like, are you talking about the game being balanced to where everybody's having fun and kind of doing stuff, or you're almost like you don't need a lot of skill to play the game? I don't know.
Yeah.
Couple different paths. This is a much different conversation than what we had last time.
Yeah.
I kind of expected different, but maybe we'll revisit this one more time. I will look through my entire history of games on the games that we played probably the most times and compare their scores, do a little bit more research on that. I actually thought about doing that, but
I remember that there was a time or two, I don't remember the exact games, but they're like, oh man, we played this 2.5 hour game and we're all within 2 points.
See, that's what I'm saying, because at that point, you don't have a lot of room for strategy, like player skill.
Mm-hmm.
Then it becomes the game was too balanced because it's almost like a railroad that you're just all riding together and ending up at the same place. And that, to me, even though it might be a fun experience to get there, that just might be one of those things where it's like, oh, wow, it would have been way cooler if the points were a little bit wider because you might feel like my decisions mattered.
Right. And that's, I think, where it comes down to, really. That's what it is. It's like, oh, I won by a good margin. Oh, man, I schooled you guys.
Yeah, schooled.
If I lost by a lot, it was like, wow, I tried a new strategy. It didn't work out. But if I was like, wow, I played really poorly. I know I lost this game, but I won or tied or came 2 points behind you. It's like, wow, I didn't do anything to deserve being so close to you guys.
And in some cases, you might have just been like, I don't even want to play this anymore. Do this, do that, do that.
Yeah.
Oh, you came in second place.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That's ridiculous stuff.
Yeah. I think it does depend on how you feel about how the game went. If it consistently happens in a certain way, then that would be more indicative as well.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just gonna say, I mean, there is the balance to a game is important. You don't want something where someone could just run away and double your score.
Exactly.
I don't believe that's a good game in itself, but I believe that there should be variance in what you can do during the game where you're not always really, really close all the time.
Right. No, I agree with that. Yeah. So, I don't know. I guess I didn't want to put too many examples because we're not trying to pick on games.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the idea behind, because there's been games. I mean, I think every group has played games where it's like, wow, we were all within 5 points. And I think it really just comes down to if you played a lot of rounds and you played a 2-hour game and you're all within a few points, you're probably not that equally skilled unless you played this thing 100 times. It's more likely the game took you on a track and got you to that position.
Yeah.
That I feel like is bad, but it's not. I don't hate it, weirdly enough. It is fun.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it is kind of concerning if you deeply think about it, because you're like, that comes down to like literally you doing one thing different.
Mm-hmm.
Or you getting to that space one time before I did first.
Yeah.
So anyway, anything else for this? We've drove this topic into the ground.
Right.
George?
that's it.
I'm good. If the game is fun to play and that doesn't happen too often, then you keep it. Otherwise, it goes.
That does kind of trump that part anyway.
Yeah.
Is it fun? Did you have a good time?
That doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, we're done with this one.